Today's Dirt Path devotional comes from 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 14. The Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and an evil spirit sent by the Lord terrified him. So this verse is very interesting for multiple reasons, because one, it's picking up after Saul has been rejected as king by God. And it would seem that the good, loving God that we serve has sent an evil spirit to torture Saul. Is the way this verse reads to us, if you're just reading at a glance. But if we stop and we think about this verse, that doesn't make sense. Why would God send an evil spirit to attack Saul? That's the very opposite definition of the word good. So we have to stop and think about that. Maybe and if you look up the meaning of the word evil here in the original text, it doesn't necessarily mean evil in this sense. But the way this spirit came at Saul afflicted Saul in an evil way. His reaction to it, his decision towards this spirit was evil. And why am I saying that? It's because Saul knows God has rejected him. Saul was disobedient to God. He went against God's way to do it, and God rejected him. So he's under what we would call conviction. He's feeling bad about what he has done, but he's not repentant over it. But rather, he is standing up against God, trying to demand that he's right, shaking his fist at God, saying, "You owe this to me." And in that attitude of his heart and mind, the Holy Spirit that's speaking to him is afflicting him. It is reminding him of his failure. It is awakening these feelings of anger and resentment within him. That's just the way Saul is reacting to God. And how does that apply to you and I? Sometimes when we encounter things in the church, or we hear a word from a pastor or a friend or a Sunday school teacher or someone like that, sometimes it's the truth. But when we hear it, our reaction to it is an evil reaction. The truth isn't evil, but it hits us in a place where it hurts, where we have to admit that we're wrong, we have to confess and change direction in our lives. Or we can do like Saul. But until we surrender and become obedient to what God's calling us to, or attempt to make the change that God's calling us to make, we're going to be like Saul. That voice of God's still going to be there. So my encouragement when reading this verse is, don't keep standing up and fighting against what God's telling you is right. Surrender your heart.